Yeah, it's crucial. My development came along, my success came along because of mentorship. I had a high school coach that believed in me and showed me that, I have a chance to make something of myself, not only on the football field, but in school and in life.
Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I'm joined by my good friend, Dave Christensen. Dave is a former Division I FBS, that means Football Bowl Series, head coach, longtime assistant. He also coached internationally at the professional level in Poland. He has a new book out right here. If you're watching on YouTube, Your Fourth Down, Why You Need to Go For It. Dave and I got to know each other late last year. He's been a part of my leadership roundtable. He's spoken at a coach's workshop that I partnered with another organization here in Spokane. And I am glad to have him as a guest to talk about. We get to talk weekly, but really share even more about his evolution in leadership, but also kind of this state of sports and youth and professional and college. Man, we could go a lot of different ways today, Dave.
Yeah, we can. And first of all, thank you for having me on. It's certainly a pleasure. And as Tyler had said, we've developed a great relationship and a friendship. Really is what I look at it as.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have a lot in common. The sports world, the leadership world. He's got young men that are going to be football players. He's going through that whole process. I've experienced that. A lot going on in an ever-changing world. So this will be fun.
So let's first start and kind of one of the things that we've talked a lot about is how you were set up for success early in your career by having great mentors, great leaders that poured into you, that guided you. And in what can you say from that? Really, if someone wanted to use it, whether in the sports or the professional world, how important is it to find those mentors and be around people that you can model yourself really after for a career, much less a lifetime?
Yeah, it's crucial. My development came along, my success came along because of mentorship. I had a high school coach that believed in me and showed me that, I have a chance to make something of myself, not only on the football field, but in school and in life. And then I went on to play at the University of Washington. I played for a Hall of Fame coach named Don James, was a great mentor. My career was not much to speak about, let's just say. Two varsity plays. Okay.
I mean, hey, you and Rudy.
Yeah, the only thing is none of my story's false. It's all true. And nobody carried me off the field.
They haven't
made a movie yet. Nobody carried me off the field after my two plays, but we did. It was a big win over Cal. We were to cover Sports Illustrated that week, so that was a big deal. But Coach James was a great mentor for me. I model a lot of things that I've done throughout my life, not only coaching, but career-wise, as a person after him. I was blessed to have a mentor like that and a person that treated everybody well and with respect. And again, I didn't bring much to him, but he brought a lot to me. And, to him, it wasn't about how much you played. It was about how you treat individuals. And so the mentorship with those two guys. And then I had, the opportunity to work 17 years for Gary Pankel. Coach Pankel is also in the College Football Hall of Fame. So he and Coach James are both in the College Football Hall of Fame. Gary played for Coach James as well at Kent State and coached for him for a number of years. I had 17 years plus a couple of years as a graduate assistant and player with Gary at Washington. And so those guys were great mentors throughout my life. And, it really doesn't matter where you're at. If you're a junior high school young man, if you're a college player or a high school player, there are mentors out there for you. There's a lot of people in the education world that can be great mentors, and it's just a matter of latching on to those people that show you interest and promise, and that model life the way that you'd like to model your life. And without great mentorship, I don't have a chance. I didn't come from a lot. I came from a low income family. I grew up in a block up from the train tracks, a block down from the housing projects. And but I wanted to have success in life, and so I tried to always surround myself with good mentors. I was fortunate. I always surrounded myself with great friends that had good families as well, and those are things that gave me an idea of what to model to have success in life. So yeah, mentorship is really important.
So you had that experience, great mentors. You led teams, you did a lot of recruiting, you engaged with a lot of high school programs throughout your entire career, right? Working with high school coaches and working with other universities out of transfers and stuff. How much did the idea of I'm a teacher, I'm a mentor over your career as you experienced that recruiting players and working with other, college coaches, how much did that change? Or did it?
Yeah, no, it really didn't change,
Okay.
Tyler. I got into coaching because of the influence that the mentors had on me. And I wanted to be able to change young men's lives going forward as well, the way that they had helped me do. It's
Yeah.
interesting. We talked the other day about this. You get into coaching, okay, and I'm going to visit with another friend of mine who's a golf coach, and I'm going to do a seminar with him. And the question is, you can ask every coach this, okay? Why are you coaching? And it really comes down to one of two things. You're either coaching because it's cool and it boosts your ego, or you're coaching because you want to try to help develop young people and give them an opportunity to be successful. And so that's been my mission the entire time. I don't know what my win-loss record is. I don't care what my win-loss record is. The only thing I know is which kids have, and the majority of them have been successful, got a college degree, understand what it takes to be a good person, how to be a father, how to be a husband, how to be a good employee, how to have discipline in their life. So that was my mission, and it's always been my mission.
But you probably interacted with a lot of high school coaches and college coaches.
Absolutely.
That was not their mission. They were kind of
No.
that first one. It's like it was all about them, their ego. How do they, portray a winning person, whatever it may be? Like, do you think that has stayed the same as over your career, or do you see more and more of that happening in today's youth and I would call amateur? They're hardly amateur anymore. Athletics.
Yeah, it's sometimes embarrassing to go and watch youth sports, for
Mm,
me. I have not been to a ton. I used to be involved and do that, but I've gone out to some former players and kids of mine, and watched youth coaching. And yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, because they put too much emphasis on winning, and
yeah.
really winning has nothing to do with I think every young person understands there's an objective to every game, right?
Yeah.
There's to outscore the opponent and win the game. Okay, we all get that. But when that's the emphasis, we're missing all these other great things that we can teach young people.
Yeah.
How to be competitive in life, how to be a teammate, how to show empathy and care about other people. Oh, and still how to compete, right? In
Yeah.
life's about
Yeah.
competition. There's nothing wrong with learning how to compete, but when we take the main emphasis and put it on winning and losing and screaming and carrying on, we're not doing these kids any justice. And so, yeah, that's the stuff that's important to me, has always been
Yeah.
important to me. It's missing, particularly in youth sports, a lot of times in high school.
Yeah.
There's not a real training program to train coaches at any level. And so if
You
you're
want to fix
not,
that?
well, I could help. Um,
Well, and
but
I say that tongue in cheek. I don't need to really. I honestly, for as much as you and I have interacted, I probably don't need to say that to you because you know that's something that's on my heart.
right,
We've done that stuff. We've talked about that stuff. But I agree. I've seen that with my kids, and I have one that's graduated, two that are still in high school, and the things that you bring up about the sad state of youth sports. And it's funny because a year ago, I had an administrator tell me it's like, well, we don't care about at the freshman and junior varsity level. We don't care about winning. I'm like, that's not the answer.
no,
That's not the answer either, because if that's the case, then just shut off the scoreboard.
right,
But you have a scoreboard, and a score matters. It matters, but I think it comes down, as we've talked about. It's like, at what cost, and really, what is winning? I could, go against a team and, maybe you play them twice, maybe, once. The school, it's like, hey, we could win. And it has nothing to do with the scoreboard, especially development and how kids fight. And, from coaches, how you bring that out of them. Is the scoreboard is an indicator of what you're able to accomplish, but it doesn't mean everything. And I think that's what
right,
gets lost into winning doesn't matter. And so they almost go, and it's like going back to when I was a kid and your kids were kids, romper room. It's like,
right.
that's not the solution either.
No, no, and I've always felt that winning is a byproduct of doing all the other things correctly. Like, we won games because I instilled discipline into my team, and not discipline just at practice. I instilled discipline in their daily lives. So they had to live a disciplined life.
Yeah.
Okay. They had to have a great attitude on and off the field. We instilled that into their life. Okay.
Yeah.
Attention to detail. My players weren't allowed to be a second late to a meeting. My meetings started on time or early, but never late. And so we put that type of attention to detail in their lives. So when we had a team doing all those things throughout their life, then winning comes, it's
Yeah.
a byproduct of those
Yeah.
things. And so we can teach all these things, and those were the things that were important. Those were the things we talked about daily. We didn't talk about winning this game coming up. We talked about preparation for the game and doing all these things, from an attitude to discipline to attention to detail to learning how to compete. We tried to teach those things as life lessons. And then the byproduct of that on Saturdays was having success on the football field.
Well, and I think I believe this, and, I think you and I have interacted about it, but have asked others that everything you just shared, which is part of what you write about in your book, the ADAPT framework, creates a mindset that allows you to win. And
Correct.
to me, when people say, "Oh, winning's just a byproduct," well, okay, it is, but at first, I want to do all those things in order to go win. And if I do those things, the chances of me winning go up dramatically. Because if I
Right.
don't do those things, yeah, I could win, but it's not going to happen with as much, I would say, consistency.
Consistency. Yes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you're gonna get moments that kick you in life. You're gonna get times where you have players get injured, whatever. But it comes back to, I think, the idea of youth sports is to win, but it's developing that winning mindset.
Right.
Which, if you win the right way, tip your hat to them. Oh man, let's do it again. And if you win because you're cheating, you're doing things to just get the W,
Right.
you haven't won anything.
No. 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 It's a buildup. Think about this, Tyler. Think about how much time we would spend with an athlete over the course of his career. Okay. And then how much of that time was spent playing a game?
Mm.
We spent all this time working on those things that were so important. They're going to carry on for life. Now, without those things, I can
Well, I
guarantee
mean,
you're
let's
not going
just
to
think
have
about
great
it. You have,
success.
let's say 12 games without, bowls, without extra 12 games at essentially 3 hours. I mean, we're just doing 36 hours. But yet you're probably on average throughout the year I'm going to guess you're spending 6, 7, 8 hours a day in some way, shape, or fashion through meetings, through practice, through just interaction, helping support whatever with players.
Absolutely. Whether it's, study hall leadership meetings,
Yeah,
practice meeting, regular position meetings, walkthroughs, lifting, conditioning, training room. I
all of
mean,
it.
yeah, you're all of it. You're with them all the time. And the thing is we're holding these guys accountable and teaching nonstop the things that are important to be successful in life and in sport and in business. It's it's an ongoing process.
So, why do you think? I mean, why do you think it's got to where it's at?
I think the pressure to win from the outside is huge. I think it is
Well,
particularly
tell us about that.
well, I mean, you know, that's what you're paid to do, unfortunately. And they're paying such big salaries now. They're going to cut ties fairly quickly if they don't get the result they want. And they're not asking about the things that are really important. It's
Yeah,
down to one thing, and that's at the highest level.
yeah.
There's some of
But I
that
think that
pressure though is coming down to high school because they got to win or they're going to be down the road. And then underneath them, they put the pressure on themselves because, they think they have to win when they really should be spending the majority of their time just developing these young men to be just that.
so. Do you think it relies upon the decision makers, the administrators, the alumni board, the board of regents, the athletic director, principals? Is it really them? And then I would even add in like the youth organizations, the levels that I've been a part of, boards, directors. Is it really kind of like, hey, if I think about, you have in the background the AFC, the American Football Coaches Association, groups like that to say, dude, what is our mission? In really that organization, I'm just picking them out because I see in the background, right? But it's as much of those overwhelming sports organizations say, what are we doing here? Because if we don't get a hold of it, this thing's going to implode from the inside.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a combination of those things. One is at the highest level, um, it's money driven, right?
Yeah.
College sports, let's face it, it's a business, it's a profession now, right?
Oh,
They're
yes.
now players are making more money than coaches. That is called professional athletics. Okay, so that's a whole another level.
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
but then when you get to the high school level, a lot of times you have decision makers that aren't qualified to be making the decisions on the things that are going on. So not all principals have any background in athletics, so when they make decisions on coaches or how the program's being ran, and they don't really know, it's really an injustice to the coaches. And their athletic
Yeah.
director should have enough background in all those areas and have a set plan of exactly what are our expectations. Okay, what are our core values here? What are we trying? What's important for a young man to graduate from our school and have learned by being one in our sports programs. To me, that's nobody wants to spend the time doing that. All these young coaches, they're looking for 20 new plays to run, right? They're
Yeah.
looking for a new drill to run.
Yeah.
Well, I'm telling you now, I could run the same plays I coached 25 years ago, and if my players are better than your players, and I train them the way I train them, I'm going to beat you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, that is the great misnomer that in so much of sports, especially youth sports, that is, oh, my technical ability and my, play calling is, going to determine success.
no.
No.
Here's the thing. I was known as a great play caller. I was finalist, runner up for the coach of the year and Division I college football. I was offensive coordinator of the year. Um, you know, they used to talk about the great halftime adjustments and the great play calling. I had a list of plays. I just called the next play. Okay, it wasn't like, and then, oh, and by the way, at halftime, do you
Dude,
think in a 12-minute halftime I can change an entire game plan that I spent probably close to 100 hours putting in? I can change that in 13 minutes at halftime? No, you can cross off a couple things and make some minor adjustments, but you're not practicing any of these adjustments. So, all those things to me are overrated.
Can can
Preparation allowed me to call plays
yeah.
because our
Yeah.
players were prepared. We did
Yeah.
that during the week. It
Well,
didn't happen on Saturday.
yeah, I think so. I've coached one middle school season of football. I played a couple years. I've watched the sport.
Many would think that you could be an expert now. Many believe that is what it
Well,
takes to be an expert.
here's the funny thing is, when I coached, so I coached a lot of things for years, and I'm a sports person, so
Right.
it's like the strategic and little fits me. I just didn't have the ability to play or whatever. And so I remember it's like, I'm not going to make this harder. So I was coaching middle school. I go to the high school and say, give me the playbook. We'll pare it down to what kids can
Right.
do, what is reasonable for them. And I remember, I created a play sheet. And of course, it wasn't just the name of the play, it was described out. So if I had to show a player here, this is where you're supposed to be, it was there.
Mhm.
And one of my assistants, he was a young kid. He comes over and goes, Tyler, why is there an X on that play? And I'm like, well, we've tried to run it 6 times and we've never executed the play. So it's not going to work. I just don't. And it killed me
Right.
because to me, it was that simple.
Yes.
If we can't do it in practice, you don't do it. And at
Yep.
the same point of like, man, every time we do it, we just execute beautifully. Like that's our go-to play all the time. And it's just, I say that laughable because as you mentioned, I just went to the next play. It's like, but you went to the next play because you prepared to
Right.
know it worked. Whereas, I see oftentimes where, coming back to the athletic director, and I think you had a great comment there is, in a lot of schools, that should be someone who is an advocate for the coaches, looking at, helping players. Like you mentioned, you had a high school coach like, hey, how can I help you? If you have aspirations to be a college player and you've done the work and you're starting to show up, like, how can I
Mhm.
help to make sure that happens? How can I make sure that, you can go to camps, you can go to these recruiting things that's good for the
Right.
school? That's my job. And by my experience, they don't do that at all.
Right.
They don't. And I think it really comes back to how we, forged a relationship and your experience in leadership and kind of mine. And, this idea of like, oh, we need to lead and lead with the stuff that you talked about is to pay, do what you've talked about in the book, do what you talked about in your career of, not worry about the outside, the metrics on the outside, like
Right.
how many games did we win or whatever else. Like, what am I doing to prepare people, support people, make sure they can do their job well with repetition? That's a lot of leadership.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's and a lot of times you'll see or hear and it's happened in college where a kid will break a rule and a coach will still play him, and that's teaching a lesson too. Unfortunately, it's not a very good lesson. And
Yeah.
so, there's got to be an accountability. For anybody to grow, you have to have accountability. And I found that, probably the toughest thing in my coaching career was holding every single person under me, whether it was staff, coach, or player, accountable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And you have to do it. And it's not always fun. It's not always easy. It's not always popular, but if you're doing things with good intentions and of the people underneath you to make them be accountable and to become the best they can be, then that's what you have to do. And it's draining to do that every single day and hold everybody else accountable.
Why did you see others struggle there? What do you think it was?
Sometimes people have success without doing those things early on. Here's the way my whole career was like this, Tyler. I had to work hard to have success in school. I had to have, I had to work hard to have success in anything in life. And so what I was able to do at a very young age is learn to put discipline in my life and push myself further than most would push themselves to have success. Um, doesn't mean I could do things better, but I could just push myself until I got over the hump and
Mm,
find a way to get it done. And I just think there's a lot of people that don't have that type of discipline in life.
yeah,
I call it TNT. It takes no talent to, when the alarm goes off, your feet hit the ground running. Right?
yeah.
Like, I worked 40 years and was never a second late in 40 years of work. And we had a staff meeting, probably, I figured it out the other day, 10,000 staff meetings over my career. I was never a second late. Well, it's because I had discipline. I just, it was important to me to be where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there and be there early. And, um, so discipline can help you overcome a lot of shortcomings in life.
Yeah, as you share that with me, and I think about my experiences, the discipline I have, in areas where, I mean, everyone struggles somewhere somehow, right? It's
Yep.
just, are you going to be disciplined in this? The more disciplined you are, it's going to show up everywhere. But understanding, where do I need to be the most disciplined? What's
Right.
going to have the greatest leverage, effect? And I stop and think that, we often believe it's the more talent, the greater ability. I tried to look up this quote. It's actually not from Wayne Gretzky, but I've heard it from Wayne Gretzky. He would say the most talented hockey players don't play in the NHL. It's the players that help those around them be the best that play in the NHL. And that's, maybe it was him or not, but whatever. It's that idea that when you start to get to those higher levels, like, yeah, there's a lot of talent, but what separates, it's the people that are showing up to meetings. They're accountable. If they make a mistake, they own it. They're not looking to get out of it, right? Because they
Right.
understand, if I try to get out of this, if a player comes to you and say, "Hey, coach, yeah, I was late to the meeting. I'm the starter. Like, man, can you let me play? Because I don't want to win." And he's like, "No, I'm a starter. I was late. I'm going to take my ownership. I'm going to make sure the
Right.
backup is ready." Now, all of a sudden, you have a greater respect for that guy, probably.
Absolutely. And again, that nobody played for me that was late. So,
Well,
uh,
yeah, but I mean, and
but
again, because you've had
they
instances
knew the
where,
consequences.
yeah,
They knew what was going to happen, and
yeah,
and so, but yeah, I mean, the more your team cares about each other, the better your team's going to be, because then they're not worried about who's the starter or
yeah,
who's getting the
yeah.
playing time. They're gonna do everything they can to make their competition on their team the very best it can be. And when that becomes the focus, rather than well, I'm getting screwed or I'm not
Yeah.
playing and I'm getting a call from the mom and dad, those teams will never have success.
How much did you, speaking of that, how much did you say, for example, we're starting right now as we're recording this, the first part of August, we have, collegiate teams, professional teams, some high school teams around the country are back into fall training, which is a
Yeah.
lot of competition for positions. Were you a coach that, man, you'd put up the lineup and it was just what it was? Or did you go through and explain to players why they were where they were?
That's a great question. And so we communicated everything with our players. And that's part of the reason that I had a no parent call policy when it comes to playing time. You can call me anytime you want about social issues or academics, but parents are never allowed to call about playing time, because if a player lost his position, we would bring him in and we would tell him why he lost his position. So it was written in our policy manual: do not have your parents call coaches. If they want to know why you're not playing, you tell them, because you're always going to know.
Yeah.
And so we never put out a depth chart with a change on it without first talking to the players prior to it being posted.
So, say for example, you had a guy who,
Right.
was second string, he goes third string, the third string's up to second string. You communicated to both of them, and you're doing that individually. At
Yes.
what point did you, say for example, like, you offensive coordinator, offensive line coach for many years, would you, at the same point, you'd have an individual player, but where would you have it by group? By group, to say, "Hey, offensive line, this is the lineup this week. I'm going to move, Brad into center. We're going to slide somebody else over to guard where he was typically backup," because that's what you guys either recognized was a better matchup or better utilization of skills, where all of a sudden players weren't like, "Oh, I got demoted because I'm not good." Like, how much would you do that? Share within the team.
Yeah, so didn't happen within the team. It happened as an individual in a private meeting. We
Yeah.
never want to embarrass them
Yeah.
or surprise
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And so before the depth chart was ever posted, every player knew what the changes were. And here's the thing, players talk. So I
Of
didn't have to tell
course.
the rest of the team
No.
because as soon as one guy got moved down, another guy got moved up, one of them was talking about it. And
Yeah.
so the players and the players, they can see who's playing well, who's performing. And so that was always handled in a private setting before the it went up.
Yeah.
Now, I may have come into my offensive line meeting after that and said,
Yeah.
"Hey, if you haven't heard, we've made some changes." And anytime a player got moved, my challenge was get your spot back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real simple. Anytime
Yeah.
a player, was not playing where he wanted to play, it was simple. Perform better than the guy in front of you.
Yeah.
We evaluate everything. Every single snap of practice was graded and evaluated on a daily basis. And could you imagine running a business like that, where every
Yeah.
single thing that you did
All.
on a daily
Yeah.
basis was evaluated and critiqued? I mean, so that and then the other thing is, I would often remind our team, and I did it as a player. It makes a lot of sense for coaches to play the best players because, see, we put a roof over our families' heads and we feed them with the money we make coaching. So to have favorites or play people that aren't the best doesn't make a lot of sense if we're trying to have longevity in
But that
taking
isn't
care of
always
our
true.
family.
That isn't always true. And you know that, and it's usually because of outside pressures. It's other pressures. It's other, circumstances. It's, I think there is an element where, and even I think about this, naturally. There would be times that, hey, I'm going to play a player because they have a better attitude. They may not have the better talent, but they have a better attitude, which
Mhm.
is going to spill over into everything. So somebody's like, hey, they're bigger, stronger, faster, maybe a better player, but man, I'm not going to play them because they don't have the attitude that is required for the team. So I would say that is sometimes, but it's also perpetuated in a system, in a culture that doesn't ferret out bad attitudes.
Yeah, and there's probably some truth to that. Attitude never came part of the physical evaluation of a player, and
Okay.
for me,
Okay.
we constantly talked about attitude in our organization,
Yeah.
and we would reprimand for poor attitudes. Now, you may be kicked off the team or suspended, but it wasn't a part of the evaluation. Attitude wasn't a choice. You
Okay.
had, I mean, well, it was a choice, but
Yeah.
you had to have a great attitude
Or
because
you
it
weren't.
is a choice, or you weren't going to be competing. Um,
Okay.
and so,
Yeah.
again, attitude was 365 days a year. You
Yeah.
show up with a bad attitude, you might write the attitude poem 5 times, which is, full page long, until you decided you're going to come with a great attitude.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't always, it would, you try to fix attitudes because, you can change everybody's attitude. If you don't, then they probably were removed and it never came into the equation
Yeah.
as a player.
Yeah. One of my experiences, and again, I think when we talk about this dynamic of leadership and coaching, and like you said, I appreciate what you just said there in regard to every single interaction of your day was graded and evaluated. Rarely is that done in business. Some places in business, but very, very, very rarely is it that quantified. And when I think about why we look at sports and what they can teach, it's sometimes that everything matters, right? Every play
Hmm.
matters, every
Right.
rep matters, all of those things. But when I stop and think about the qualities of leadership, and one of the things that you mentioned, the ability to lead, drive attitude, to have those conversations, to be willing to do with the interactions. You've said this earlier and convinced of it. You do all those things well, the plays don't matter.
Right. Absolutely.
And yet, and you could apply that in business. If you take care of your customers, you take care of the people, do you have a new way of, performing? Yeah, if you're competing against somebody else that does all those well, maybe it's going to matter. But if you do the things internally that really make matter, and I have used that word a lot now, but that really matter, man, it will show.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's why, you know, analyzing everything that you do throughout the year. Now, I'm not a big believer in just making wholesale changes all the time. Something's not working. Oh, we got to change this. We got to change that. No, we believed in what we were doing, but you still have to analyze it on a daily basis. You still have to critique what you're doing,
Yeah.
and maybe just find a niche here or there that could make it better. But you've got to do that all the time because it's ever changing, right? But you know, it's the attention to detail. We had a staff meeting every single morning so that I could cover anything that I saw the day before in the entire organization. That's why we had a staff meeting every single day. They might have been 2-minute staff meeting. It might have been a 2-hour staff meeting. It just depended on what had happened the day before. They had to be critiqued and covered.
Yeah. So, we've talked about this. We've been able to break this down. And recently I just saw a video, Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was
Mhm.
at a university. He was speaking to college students, and somebody asked about his style compared to Bill Belichick. And he goes, oh, I mean, Bill was very authoritarian. It was like, kind of classic boot camp. I'm going to break you down and you don't think you just do. And Bill and, Pete's like, I'm more of the other end where it's more of a collaborative. I want you to, and like, he studied special forces a lot. He talks about in the video of like,
Right.
we're going to make sure that you're cohesively together, but man, you got to care about those around you, have to be an individual. I want you to be able to think on the field and do all those things. And so he goes through that. You and I've talked a bit about it. It's, which which do you think that you on that spectrum fit in your leadership style?
Yeah, that's a good question because I look at I've studied Pete Carroll for a long time, and I've taken stuff from Pete Carroll. I've studied Bill Belichick. I have always tried to study successful people,
Yeah.
and so I would say early on I was more Bill Belichick, and later in my career or in my head coaching career, I became Pete Carroll. And
Okay.
so a combination of both because I
Yeah.
don't think that just the total you know dictatorship
Yeah.
works
Yeah.
anymore. Times have changed, and so you have to change with the times. And I recognize that, and help with some help of the players,
Yeah.
and tried to take a little more of a Pete Carroll approach to things.
So what do you think was the biggest change that you made personally?
Just being more available for the players.
Okay.
My last year, might have been my last 2 years as a head coach. I'd go down to the locker room every day for an hour and sit on the couch and just talk to players. I would literally just sit down in the locker room when they're getting dressed and ready for practice and seek to, what with the players for an hour every day, every day. So, if somebody had something, I had, just whatever. And I did that a lot as an assistant coach. I did the same thing at Missouri. I used to go sit in the locker room 45 minutes before meetings started just to talk to players, and whether they're defensive players or other positions. And relationships are everything. Listen, if Coach Pinkel used to say this all the time. I used to say the same thing. My players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And so the only way, and it's again, it's like everything in life. It's about relationships, right? Everything is about relationships.
Yeah.
It's having relationships, not just with my players, having relationships with every player on the team, and trying to build those relationships. My whole goal from recruiting, to me, recruiting was just about building a relationship so strong that they couldn't say no. That was
Yeah.
my philosophy in recruiting. And
Yeah.
and so, relationships are everything. And, I don't think that's ever going to change.
Well, I mean, as I have a son that start to enter that world and, again, having guidance from yourself and a lot of others, it's, understanding that, it's really come back and say, who's going to treat you genuinely through this process?
Right.
And, everyone, someone is, hey, they're trying to get players. And are they going to treat you genuine? Do they want the best for you, or do they go scorched earth? Because if you start to see that, then hey, that's going to happen. My guess is there's a difference. If you went into recruiting and you're like, I want to build a relationship with the players and do that earnestly, then that's how it's going to be when they are a player. And if you're
Right.
going through and you're playing the political games, right? And we see that in office places. We've
Yep.
seen that, administratively. It's like we're you start to play games. Well, hey, you only have 6 hours to sign this to come here and coach, or you're out, and you're like, all right, well, is it gonna be like that when I'm coaching? And sometimes when there's only a handful of jobs, unfortunately, you have to play that game.
Mhm.
But if you're like, I have a myriad of options, workplaces, man, I don't need that pressure if it's not right for me, because if someone is right for me, then they're going to, look out for me anywhere in the
Right.
process. And
Yeah.
I think that, as you talk about it, building relationships with players, having that interaction. And again, sport, it doesn't matter if it's youth sports or high school sports or professional sports. I think the coaches that have done that well, really the success over time has shown.
Absolutely. It's funny. I used to tell players in recruiting, reach out to a former player of mine, reach out to any of them. You want to find out about me? Talk to the players that are here. I'm not going out with you at night. Talk to them, ask them the truth. What you see is what you get.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to kiss your ass. And I told a lot of players that on the phone. I may not like your social media, because I could give a crap about your social media, but I will make you into the best you can be. I'll take you places you can't take yourself, and
Yeah.
I'll treat you, respect um, hold you accountable every single minute that you're with me. And that's what you're going to get. If that's not the lifestyle you want to live, no problem. There's a lot of schools out there. Go somewhere else.
One of the things that, through that recruiting process, and I've seen this in businesses. I've seen it in the case where, hey, you look to bring someone in, they don't take the job, then all of a sudden, maybe a year later, because of whatever circumstances, the job is open again. You build that relationship. All of a sudden, if you don't burn a bridge, that person is possibly available to come. You weren't in the day and age of the massive transfer portal that we see today,
Right.
but you probably had transfer players. How
Yes.
many of those were virtue of the relationship that you built, that you recruited them maybe 2 or 3 years beforehand, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm still here for you. Like, come to us. I'm still, that relationship isn't transactional.
Well, I signed a really good high school offensive lineman when I was at Texas A&M, and then he signed with A&M, and I moved on. And then fast forward 4 years, he'd redshirted, played 3 years, and got his degree in business, and was now eligible to transfer as a graduate transfer. And, and he transferred to Arizona State to play for me. And I never even got to coach him. I just recruited him, but we had a great relationship. And he transferred to Arizona State, started at left tackle, was the best left tackle in the Pac-12 conference. And it was just because of the relationship we had developed 5 years earlier.
Yeah.
I had a young man I recruited to Texas A&M, didn't sign with A&M, ended up signing with Alabama, was a first-round draft pick for Alabama. Called me after I got let go at Texas A&M, and just to check on me, just to see where I was at, how I was doing. And so, it's to me that, that's everything. That's what relationships are about,
Yeah.
and to me, that's what you want to look for in recruiting, whether you're being recruited to a business or recruited to play a sport somewhere. You just want to go at a place where the relationship is real, where it's,
Yeah.
there's so many stories you hear of, how things change, the joke is in recruiting. Yeah, it's all great. And then when you get there, it's going to be completely different. Well, I tried to do as much as I could to make sure that, when you came into my room, it wasn't going to be any different than what I told you and your folks it was going to be.
Yeah.
You're going to be held accountable. You're going to be early. You were going to,
Yeah.
and I did that with my players. And even coming down to my last week of coaching, I had 2 players, good kids, show up just on time, not late, but just on time. And they brought some breakfast, and they were a morning practice. And I said, I've been in this business a long time. and I've had certain, rules and regulations. And let me just tell you something. I might only have a week or two left, but we're not going to change one bit. I've never changed. I've had great integrity. I've hold you accountable, and that's not going to change. Get your ass here on time, and on time is 5, 10 minutes early for the next 4 days. And didn't bat an eye. They just, they knew, when you set the expectation, most of the time people want to try to achieve the expectation,
Well, I
so
think, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about boys, raising boys. I have 2 high school boys. And I think, again, when you go into coaching, it's like the thing that I've learned with boys, and you have a son and daughters, is,
yeah,
there's a difference in regards to girls. I won't get into that, but I've found with my boys is they want hard guardrails.
yes,
They will go in between those and find their way, but they want to know where that is. And the more
yes,
that you can be there, and it's, it's funny because my wife Kelly and I will joke, so much where it's like, it's not like girls where they're not fighting. They're not, it's like, no, our boys are going to do that. That's normal. They're going to goof around. They're
right,
going to do things that they're going to regret, but it's their way of figuring out how to interact, how to be with people. And if
absolutely,
you set the guardrails and let them wander in between, shoot, my boys are 17 and almost 16. I can't say I've figured it out, but we haven't had many like way beyond the
right,
guardrail situations. That was
yeah,
my experience. What I'm picking from you is, as a coach, the more that I set the guardrail, I was hard there, right? And just keeping accountability, it made everything else in the organization easy.
yes. No, you're absolutely right. You hit it spot on, and that's what I deal with boys like that
Yeah.
age, and
Yeah.
and so you got to have some boundaries, but
Yeah.
you certainly don't want their boundaries, like that wide, because they learn
Suffocating.
through trial, right? You learn through failure, right? I mean, that's part of life, but
Yeah.
but you also don't want the boundary so wide that you know there's they can get away with anything.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think that's where, when I hear from you and the great opportunity for, I think I shared it with you. I'll share it with you now. And I'd love for you to think about, because you've talked about it, is I realized a couple years ago that coaching high school age boys, coaching soccer, I was preparing them to be in the workforce. And
right,
when I stop and think about like yourself and, think, yeah, a handful of players, they've played professionally, they've gone on to it, but a lot of your players have made it in the coaching ranks. A lot of your players have made it into other professions. What I hear from you is you were working hard to set them up for whatever profession they were going to, because you realize that, as opposed to, now I'm just here to coach football.
absolutely. So my wife and I, our goal as a couple was to try to prepare young men to be one, good people, two, productive citizens, three, great husbands, four, great fathers, and five, be great in the workplace. And so we wanted to model that. And that's what we, we didn't sit at home and say, gosh, how many games do you think we can win this year? Because I don't think my wife could really care less how many games we won. She wanted me to win because it kept us going. But
Yeah.
that wasn't what we talked about. When we sat on the airplane to fly to a game, it was important to us that she traveled with me every single game and sat with me every single, day on the plane. She traveled with me a lot in recruiting. She went to every function we ever had because we wanted to model what it should look like for them. And so, we had a philosophy that, this is what we were going to try to do to help develop good young men and have them leave our program ready to attack the world in a very positive way. And you know what? They didn't always like it
No.
on a daily basis, but I cannot tell you how many contact me now and thank me for what we did for them.
There, as you take from that and the willingness to be that, and you bring it up earlier where, professional sports has changed, collegiate sports have changed, high school sports have changed. I think it's unilaterally, there's more time demand across all of them. And there are massive restrictions collegiately. There are massive restrictions high school level, as far as how much time you get to work with kids, trying to keep the competition level flat.
Mhm.
but that's put a tremendous amount of stress on head coaches, assistant coaches to do
Yeah.
more with less. We've probably seen more of that even than what it was maybe 30 years ago. Is
Yeah.
that fair?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And now it's an ever changing team, right? There's no guarantee. Every year it's a new team. I mean, it's free agency for a college football team to flip half of its players now year by year is not a big deal. It happens.
Yeah.
And we would lose some players. They're, every
Yeah.
year but not 50% of the team. And so, trying to teach these lessons, which don't happen overnight because it's a learning curve, right? These
Yeah.
kids have to learn through it's a process. But when they're only at a place for a year, and then they go to another place, and maybe philosophically some things are different, and then they go to another place, then they go to another place. Um, it's very difficult to do in the business what I got in the business and my wife and I set out to do to train these young
Yeah.
people because there's no loyalty anymore in staying in one place and going through the trials and tribulations and growth.
One day we were talking and you made the comment to me. It's like, whether this is still the case or not, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of had told the idea of it's like, get out of, the collegiate, go to the professional where you can have more family time.
Absolutely.
Family time was something imperative for you.
Yep.
I just saw the coach at I think Eastern Michigan, Coach Tranquil was talking about, hey, 7 o'clock we're home. You've shared that same thing for me. How important was that in an environment that was very much laden? Man, if you're not working 20 hours a day, you're not doing enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that still have that mindset. I just saw a thing the other day, and I'm trying to remember where it was at, where the coach makes them go home at Eastern Illinois, I think it is. You got to leave at 5 o'clock, period, every day. Can't work past 5. And mine was 6. Um, because yeah, there's the camp that believes that hours equal winning, and then mine was just be efficient and thorough, and then get it done, and then go home and spend time with your family because that's going to be more important than what you're doing at the office.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe that you can do it and not have to be away from your family and work stupid hours. And you can have success and not have to do that. And some people they think it's a badge of honor to stay
Yeah.
at the office for 16 hours.
Yeah.
I think it's a badge of whatever idiocy
Well,
to
I
do
mean,
that.
I guess I fall into that camp. There's times I know people that, oh, I pulled an all nighter, this or that project. I've never done that in my life. I have never. Maybe it's just my own, stubbornness. Could I probably at times? Sure, whatever. Have I driven through that? Yeah, I've done stupid stuff like that. But as far as like, man, I got to work through the night together. It's like
No.
you're either not that good or your shot glass is so of I guess ability mentally that you're whatever you're pouring into it, it's not going to be good. Be fresh. And I think there's a lot of different careers that have understood that. It's like, you need rest, you need mental clarity,
Yeah.
you need all of those things, and just pounding away, grinding at hours and hours and hours is not productive. But
Yeah.
yet I think it comes back to, as you've shared, this culture and which culture you're going to create. And it sounds like there are more younger coaches that are saying, no, we're not going to ruin families. We're not going to ruin lives. I heard from a guy that I met over the weekend at a sports event that he was at a school, and the entire, like, a couple of the coaching staff, all of their family lived in another city and they were there. And I'm just like, I don't know how that would work. It was because of the transit and this or that. And like, and it was just kind of cultural. And I'm like, that's only going to lead to bad.
Yep.
Because at some point you're going to be strained, you're going to be stressed, and you're not going to get the best out of people.
No, I agree. And you're right. I tell all the young guys now, get in the NFL. You're not responsible for your players other than when they're playing football. And when you're done, you're done. You go home.
Yeah.
You go watch your kids play sports in the spring, and you don't recruit, so you're not spending nights on the road like that. It's a much better situation now,
Yeah.
and you don't have that cell phone 24/7 because kids are transferring all the time. You always got to have your cell phone, and so it's just college athletics is in a what I would say a pretty bad spot right now, and there needs to be some serious change made.
What's the first change? If you're
Come up
changing college football today, what's the first change, coach?
Well, the first thing you do is you put a salary cap on the amount of money they can pay players, so everybody's got an equal chance to do it, and everybody financially has a chance to do it. You put regulations on what players can make. You put a retirement plan or a pension plan or some type of forward plan for their money so that they have money later in life. Um, that would be the first steps. Yeah, if you sign with a school, I think you should have to stay 2 years before you can leave. If you leave, you should have to pay back part of what you made.
Mm.
Put some of those, some of those things in, so that it's not just an open market and kids looking for the best handout they can get.
So I've talked to my friends about this, and I think maybe you and I threw it out at you one time. Along those, I think that's phenomenal. But I wonder, you coached at, the higher level Division I. There's obviously lower level Division I called the FCS, the Football Championship
Mhm.
Series. And there's a lot of players that move from FCS to FBS schools, and usually do so because, they either developed, they grew, they got good coaching, and all of a sudden they're a better player than what they were coming out of high school, which just happens, right? And
Happens,
one of the things
absolutely.
I've talked to my friends to preserve those schools and to give those, so give them a transfer fee. Hey, if you're a player that goes and signs and you're making $1 million a year,
Mhm.
hey, pay back 100,000 to the school they came from, because they did the work, and it gives reason for that lower level school to still have great value in the system. What do you think of that?
I think it's a great idea. Absolutely. Now, I don't know if there's a lot of lower levels going to make 1 million,
Yeah,
but if they had to pay 10% of whatever they make
yeah,
back to the school they came
yeah,
from, it's fair.
yeah,
It's fair. They're still making plenty of money, right? I mean, kids aren't starving in college anymore. If you're playing athletics, you're making a lot of money,
yeah.
and so certainly enough to support yourself. So yeah, I think if they put a 10% stipulation on it, if you transfer up, um, I would do it. You know, all the way down. I mean, Division III,
Yeah,
Division II,
yeah,
Division
yeah.
1 AA, 10%, because whatever they make goes back to that school. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I think it would be.
So, in regard to kind of this wild, wild west, the NCAA, and all the challenges they've gone through, do you think it's going to have to be the conferences that agree to this? Do you think there's going to be a re-evolution as you talk to people, as you watch from the outside and you interacted there? Do you think the NCAA is capable anymore of doing something to solve that?
I don't know how much the NCAA is going to be around. To
Yeah,
be honest with you,
yeah,
I look for college football probably to get down to about 64 teams in a super conference,
yeah,
and everybody else will be on the outside. They'll still play college football and
yeah,
those, but there's going to be a super league. Those that have, um, major media markets, it's already kind of happening.
hmm,
Washington State, Oregon State, they have no real conference anymore because they could not generate a media. They don't have a media market, right?
hmm,
And so they're by the wayside. Well, Iowa State's going to be in the same boat. Kansas State's going to be in the same boat. Schools in those type of areas are going to be on the outside because they're not going to be able to generate the money that it takes to be on
yeah,
the inside.
yeah. Which I think
Yeah.
even gives more credence to all right, find out where we're at, pay back to those schools, give kids an opportunity to grow, develop. And hey, if you're at Kansas State for 2 years and then you can go to Nebraska, you can go to Ohio State, you can go to an Alabama, you can go to a
Yeah.
UW, then man, that's great for everyone in the system because it gives a place for players to develop, across the whole spectrum. One thing, and you still have, obviously, you're not that many years out of coaching, just a couple, is how are at schools, how are schools managing getting their money? Do you know at all? Or is it just kind of like a little bit of the coaching is like, I don't know, I'm going to put that on someone else. I got enough other things to do. Or do you think head coaches that you interact or know with, how much are they managing the current financial pieces of their team?
Yeah, most aren't. They have GMs now that
Yeah.
handle all that. And
Yeah.
so they're handling the finances, they're handling the packages. Like, they may tell the position coach, okay, here's what you've got, and here's the package you can present. You got X amount for your position. And
Yeah.
so that's what they've done now. So
That's
all
the
the
system they're
schools have
working with.
gone to a GM to run that.
Yeah.
And obviously the head coach has he's got so many other things going on to
Sure.
add that whole thing on top of being the head coach is
Yeah.
you couldn't manage it all.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they've gone
No, I
to-
mean, it's a lot. I think
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's been difficult is it has been so much all at once without really a regulatory system, because as you said, NCAA just kind of took a lot of lumps over the years of the different things they were involved, not involved, how they took a stance, not take a stance. And, now they're dealing with all their Title IX stuff beyond everything else. So,
and
it's another way.
I think it's awesome that these kids are going to make some money. I just wish there would have been a system in place so that it was a more fair system, and and it wasn't just throwing these large sums of money. I mean, yeah, there's money for them to make, and they deserve it. They are the ones who are bringing in the money.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, uh,
It-
it's interesting where it's going to go.
Yeah. Dave, as we wrap up, one more thing is, where can people learn more about your speaking business, your book, all of the stuff that you're doing to really give back and support what I would say everything we've talked about today?
Yeah, so you can go to my website. It's coachchristianson.net. That is my book website, coachchristianson.net. I also have another site called coachchristianson.com. It goes over my speaking engagements. My new book is out, Your Fourth Down, Why You Need to Go For It, My Offensive Strategies to Success in Life. You can get that on the website as well, or you can go to Amazon. And so those are ways that people can reach out to me. I've been out doing some keynote talks now and some workshops. And so if I can help in any way, I'd love to have the opportunity to come out and utilize some of my experiences along the way to help other people have success.
Well, Dave, thanks so much. Thank you for being a part of my life the last few months, and look for that continuing. And I'm grateful to have people like you, as I'm stewarding my son through this process, someone to come to you and say, hey, help me. So I'm grateful for that. I haven't told you that yet in so many words, but I am. And with that as well, everyone watching today, if you're watching on YouTube, if you can hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to get notified whenever we drop new content, would love for you to get that. As well, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you could rate and review this episode, it will help more people find impactful individuals like Coach Christensen. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.